The avalanche of sexual assault and harassment allegations continue as another high-profile name or 2 or 3 or 10 names have been added to the rapidly growing list of accused. Have we reached a tipping point? Or is there a bigger agenda at play here? We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about some of the actions that are being suggested to take in order to stop this sexual assault harassment epidemic that's going on right now, just sweeping across the nation. On this episode of the Propaganda Report, this is Brad Binkley. I'm here with Monica Perez. Monica, how are you doing today? I didn't mean that to be any sort of a...
What did you mean by that?
I didn't mean anything by what I just said.
I am not going to regale you with the many, many stories of my own experience with sexual harassment and how the difference between that and some of my fun experiences with a little off-color humor, even in the workplace. So I can take it. I can take it, coworker.
Well, I'm not getting lulled into that again.
I enjoy humor, even if it is.
See, that's the problem, though. This is where this is going. At least they're trying to push it this way. Is you don't even know. You might think you're okay, but then you get in a fight with someone, and then it's retroactive at this point. And because we're no longer worrying about due diligence or a court of law, they can retroactively convict you in the court of public opinion and just shame you to death.
Yes, that is the problem with any kind of humor or sarcasm or whatever in digital writing that I've noticed. But I've actually, I think, come full circle in that I feel like they can make up stuff anyway. They can actually replicate your voice, or I guess duplicate your voice.
Oh, yeah.
They could just make stuff up on it. If you're talking about electronic zeros and ones, they can just string that stuff along, and you know what I mean? So I don't even care. If they brought up a real email, I would deny it. If they brought up a fake email, I would deny it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't even want to be chilled anymore. But I just, the lack of humor, really, when these identity issues, whatever, you just can't use humor anymore.
No.
You know, humor comes from what's surprising, what's different. Take objective references and say something funny or different about them. But if you have if objectiveness is totally replaced by subjectiveness, and your culture is so splintered that we don't share any norms, you can't have humor. And if you insert humor, you're like, you're being culturalist. You know, that only reflects your cultural experience, but it could offend other people.
Yeah, and it could offend them in a way where you're labeled a sexual abuser. Not to say that some of these people that are being accused haven't done things. There is a problem there.
That's the thing.
That's the thing.
I was sexually harassed, like, unbelievable. It's very disturbing. I've been teaching my daughter how to not let them trap you into thinking it's your fault and all this kind of crap. The first time I was sexually harassed is it was the first time I ever babysat. The guy, I was really molested. The dad came home early drunk and was like, I had to literally physically escape this guy. I was 13 at the most. And it happened all through law school and business school, summer jobs. There was one job I was being sexually harassed by the guy I was working for, the girl I was working for, and the married guy I was sharing an office with. So it's real. That's for sure. But now, why all of a sudden is it like something to talk about? And I actually coined a phrase, the Weinstein paradox. I guess you could say the Weinstein effects, but the Weinstein paradox, I'm going to call. People say I'm a conspiracy theorist. And the number one argument against conspiracy theories is, how could you keep everybody quiet? Well, how could they keep everybody quiet about Weinstein and Louis C.K. and everybody else on earth? Wasn't Jon Stewart shocked hearing Louis C.K.? He pulls it out in front of everybody, but nobody talks about it? Bull. You keep quiet because your job depends on it. And that's true for conspiracies and false flags and sexual harassment. And I call it the Weinstein paradox.
And people also keep quiet if they might also get accused of something. And you're right. Jon Stewart said that he was completely shocked to find out about Louis C.K., which that completely shocked me, because I've been in theater. I've been in a lot of comedy clubs, know a lot of comedians. I've known, or at least I heard probably 6 or 7 years ago, that Louis C.K. was infamous for pulling his junk out in front of people in public. That is
so weird.
known.
I'm so happy to say I have no recollection, maybe blocked out, of anyone ever doing that to me. And I have been sexually harassed many, many times, but I can't say I've ever experienced that moment.
You spend enough time in the theater and it gets to the point of going, wow, I didn't see somebody's dick tonight.
No,
nobody pulled it out tonight.
Bad? Do you think the reason it was still, because in my fields, banking and law, I don't know about if law ever straightened up, but the banking culture, the investment banking culture, really, I noticed it really straightened up when when it was crystal clear that you could bankrupt a company. People or bankrupt people personally. As soon as there started to be big enough punitive lawsuits, whatever, then people weren't willing to risk their jobs on it. And that's actually the appropriate forum for this. This isn't about policy. This is about the policy. You're not allowed to do it. And you should sue people. And that's why you get big payouts to encourage people to sue. You should sue people. You should prove it, all that kind of stuff. And, but when I wonder if, like, in the theater and stuff, for some reason, because there isn't that much to lose, a lot of these people have nothing to lose and stuff to gain. The culture is, you can't motivate people like that. We'll take away your paycheck. It's a little tricky.
Well, nobody was offended either. It wasn't one of those things where everybody was like, oh my God. Maybe the first time.
Chicks and guys are sitting around and guys pull their dicks out.
Yeah, sometimes.
Oh my gosh!
Or you'll look over and one dude will have his balls pulled up in his zipper just to get a reaction out of people. It's really it's you get to
humor.
You go in everyday life. Yeah, it's constant contest of who can make people laugh.
Yeah,
and that's what some people's go to. And
right.
Honestly,
and if just being edgy is
right.
Yeah, I mean, you'll just get edgy. That's not my style, but I can totally understand if all you got is edge, then you're going to out-edge people.
Well, here's the thing. Nobody cares as long as they like the person. The girls don't care. The guys go, oh, put your freaking dick away. But as soon as you don't like somebody, and now that they put this stuff in people's heads that everything is sexual assault or sexual harassment, there's no, like, clear line there, then it just becomes, if I don't like that person, I decide that what that person did was harassment or assault, even though if the other person did it, I'm perfectly fine with it. And that's the problem with these allegations, this flood of allegations that's coming out right now. Some of the backstory is, I'm not going to go through all of the list of people who've been accused, because I'm literally looking at a list of over 800 people and film and producers. I mean, almost everyone has been accused of something, and it goes. Like, Al Franken is the most recent one, but he's not even the most recent one, because Sylvester Stallone yesterday was accused. The guy from Arrested Development, the dad, was accused yesterday.
Why didn't those pictures of Al Franken come out when he was running for office? Why do they? The media obviously suppresses anything
because they sit on it. Right. They got pictures like that. They probably have 10 different people walking up to that girl doing the same thing just to comkompromise people in case they need to do it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, actually, you don't get to be senator if you don't have pictures like that they can use against you when the time comes.
What's hilarious about the way that this is the reaction of this, it's just a contest of the left, somebody gets accused, the right, somebody gets accused, and both sides, when it's their own side being accused, like, people on the right, for Roy Moore, they're going, well, we need due diligence. We need to, if it's true, then he needs to stop running. But we need to do our due diligence. But if the person on the left, automatically guilty. On the left, is we need to do due diligence. But on the right, automatically guilty. So they both want due diligence when it's their person. Although Al Franken did say that he grabbed her and it was a joke. So it's not like, what are they going to investigate?
Well, that's proven. There's nothing to look into.
But they're doing an ethics council on to investigate this. He already admitted it, yet they're calling for an ethics, an investigation into it.
And that actually wasn't that long ago. The thing with Roy Moore, first of all, I mean, these allegations are weird. There's absolutely no evidence of it. One of the things they're saying, I shouldn't say that. I don't know about the evidence, but the thing that I could not find any evidence on, they're saying he was banned from a mall because he used to loiter to pick up teenage girls. And they're like, we don't keep records that far back. It's like, okay, so you get a bunch of people to lie. You could conceivably get a bunch of people to lie and bring someone down politically, which is very dangerous. And it's so dangerous that only a short time ago, whatever it was, 20 years ago, when Anita Hill was trying to do that to Clarence Thomas, it was predictable that they would not allow her, could not, left or right, people could not allow her to be successful, because it's such a fundamental violation of like legal principles that you just cannot give unfounded, unsubstantiated allegations that kind of political power, because it just, it just collapses the political system. It's what the First Amendment is all about. It's about that freedom of speech and stuff. And that's why these guys getting set up for crimes, going to jail, like Nacho, who defended Quest against warrantless wiretaps, or Sachtleben, who was the whistleblower against the second underwear bomber. These guys went to jail for insider trading and kiddie porn, respectively, to shut them up. So when you come out and you shut somebody up, like Bill Cosby, who tells people that if they don't speak proper English, they will continue to be an underclass and that they're falling for it, and that's no good. That is so they don't like that. So to punish that political speech, they go back and take what seems to be, have some foundation in these old allegations. But you look at Thomas Jefferson and Martin Luther King, and they have had sexual predilections that offend people, but it's completely irrelevant, because what's relevant to them is their political impact. And that if you start allowing, you're going to take mediocrity to a whole new level. So the problem I think Plato predicted on democracy is that you would get ever closer to mediocrity, that you would have to just have the blandest person run. Bland to appeal to the most people. And at this point, you have to have people, it's completely irrelevant. It's like when both of my kids, who go to two different schools, both said to me that in the past week or two that my political views are so anathema to their cultures, which are different cultures, that they both said separately that they would have no political opinion going forward. I was like, look, you can't lie. You don't have to start fights, whatever. And both of them said, well, I just won't have a political opinion, which is exactly what this thing is trying to, it's by preventing anyone from having any personality, having any experience, whatever, you really neuter anybody who's politically outspoken. And like for my kids, it's the politics itself that they're being penalized for. But these other people are being penalized for something outside of politics. It's really, that is to me, in the spirit of the First Amendment, an attack on the First Amendment. Maybe not the letter of the law, but the spirit of it, you're not supposed to allow that.
Well, this whole thing is an attack on the First Amendment. I have like 7 or 8 agenda items if this is going to serve.
Oh, yes. Okay. I just have to dovetail one quick thing and then I'll stop.
Go ahead.
The Fifth Amendment, which is due process under the law, is actually designed to make sure that you can't persecute people for political reasons by accusing them of crimes. And then you were saying how you can go back. You can go back and find stuff somebody said in order to persecute them in the future, which is why that total surveillance state that's going to sweep up all our information into one place. That was that's what Cornyn in Texas is trying to do by having the military, as a result of the Texas church shooting, having the military put all their stuff in the same database as the civilian and all that. Eric Holder started that. But the 1974 Privacy Act was a result of Watergate, and it was designed to not allow that because they could see how political persecution could arise from having that kind of intimate knowledge of people's habits and information and stuff. It's why your social security number is not your driver's license number. It's so that politicians or people in power cannot have access to all of your information and use it to neutralize you politically. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, now they have access to everything about you via Facebook and all your other social media.
But I think it's interesting, though, that this is exactly what it's for. It's exactly all of this stuff is a problem. And those protections were all in place for the very reason that what you do not want to be able to do is neutralize someone politically for non-political, by using the tools in the non-political realm, or being able to use the legal system or the court of public opinion without due process, stifling free speech, all of that. You see how I'm trying to
I know
I'm
exactly
trying to
what
my
you're saying.
vision to you. I'm having this moment, this aha moment of what a holistic organism the Bill of Rights are, and these fundamentals, which all of this is attacking in a very profound way. Because I was trying to just understand what's happening here.
Well, it's communist in nature.
And it's Roy Moore it's really demonstrating they want to flip the South. They wanted to take Sessions and Price out of the Congress. And now those two seats, Ossoff and now Roy Moore, those are the seats the Democrats came full bore, try to flip those important red seats blue. And they're doing it. I think the GOP should not have backed down to support this guy, because, you can't have this guilty until proven innocent thing become a political weapon.
But that's what it is, though. And the thing is, I don't know enough about it. He might be guilty of something. And so it puts people in that position of, I could be defending a pedophile. Of course, everybody's on the left, nobody cared when Bill Clinton and, nobody cared about that. But it puts people in a tough position. And when you have a whole bunch of accusers come out, there's this faulty reasoning that, honestly, people don't think about it. There's no thinking involved in it. The feeling is they want to believe it so bad on either side. And in some cases, there's going to be truth to it. In other cases, things are going to be fabricated. Look, all these people who've been accused over the past few weeks, there's no way that all of them are guilty. Some of them, I'm going to give one of the accusations in a minute just to show how they're conflating the really bad stuff with the stuff that's nothing really, just to show how they're I'll get to that in a second. But by just, there's this faulty reasoning of, oh, well, and I read this same quote almost verbatim in like 10 different articles yesterday. It gets to the point of when there's so many people who've come out and accused that it's hard not to believe it's true. That is faulty logic, faulty reasoning.
Oh, that made me crazy. They kept saying 6 women. And it's like, yes, you can get 6 liars. But they had the same story. I'm like, okay, did they tell those stories in like a double blind test where they heard each other?
Or were they asked leading questions that they said yes to? There's no background to. There's so many ways that they can manipulate that. And that's a known propaganda technique. They've used that type of technique, probably since the beginning of time.
Yeah, fallacious argument.
Yeah, you want to brand somebody with something. If you don't have a strong argument that has a whole bunch of evidence, you just get a whole bunch of people to repeat the same thing over and over again. And in some cases, there are a bunch of victims. So that's why it's hard. But when one group of people on an emotional level wants to believe something so badly, all they need is that high number, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it becomes 40 people accuse so-and-so. You're going to tell me 40 people are lying? Or I'm going to say, yeah, that's possible. It's you look at a case-by-case basis, and if you start seeing a little bit of evidence here, a little bit of evidence there, then you start to build a case in support of the fact that maybe he did do something. But just simply by accusing someone of something, you don't have credible an accusation from a random person is not credible evidence until you look into that accusation. But all they rely on is that number. Now, I haven't looked deeply into the Roy Moore accusations because, frankly, there's so many accusations, you get so many people coming out randomly that you can't keep up with all of it. So I'm going to assume that some of these people are guilty and some of these people aren't. But the reason they're doing this, there's a number of reasons they're doing this, is basically if everybody's guilty, then nobody's guilty. Because you can't prosecute everybody. You can't prosecute most of these cases anyway because statute of limitations. But if everybody's guilty, nobody's guilty, and it's a societal problem, so you can give them treatment like they gave Weinstein, like they gave Spacey, and the people who actually did really bad stuff don't get punished. They get thrown in with, like, I'm going to read you one of the what one of the accusations is, and there's a lot of them that are like this. And this is an effect it's having on people. Not only, this can be stimulated artificially. People can come out and say like no, this is definitely sexual assault, and cause other people to feel like it's a bandwagon effect. If everybody's hashtagging Me Too, people feel left out. They say, maybe I was sexually assaulted as well. And people start reading things into actions and words that might not be there, because they've muddied the waters on purpose, because it broadens their victim pool. If they actually went by the letter of the law and were specific and concrete about what sexual assault and sexual harassment is, then they would exclude people. They don't want to exclude people. They want everybody to feel like they've been assaulted at some point. So here's what one of the actions is. And this is actually Weinstein's brother. His brother, who many believe is a person who threw Harvey Weinstein under the bus to begin with because he didn't like the way he was running the business. He was accused, and this is what the accuser did. A female showrunner who worked for Weinstein Co. on The Mist has accused Bob Weinstein of sexual harassment during the production of a Spike TV series. Amanda Siegel, an executive producer, said that Weinstein repeatedly made romantic overtures to her and asked her to join him for private dinners. The harassment began in the summer of 2016 and continued on and off for about 3 months until Siegel's lawyer informed TWC executives that she would not be working there anymore if Bob Weinstein did not continue contacting her on personal matters. No should be enough, Siegel told Variety, and no, anybody who has asked you out should just move on after hearing no. Bob kept referring to me that he wanted to have a friendship. He didn't want a friendship. He wanted more than that. That's the sexual assault accusation. He asked her out
repeatedly.
Yes. And so basically,
that's annoying.
If this is the standard, yeah, but it's also right. How some people.
But that's it. I mean, sex is male female is there for sex. It just exists. So if you want to mix up the workplace, I mean, when women went into the military, you can't. I mean, my father was like horribly opposed to that because it was just he predicted what would happen, and it has happened. And right. I'm not saying women shouldn't be in the workplace. I mean,
no,
I'm just saying it's a part of getting asked out happens at work. And
getting asked out again after saying no is part of like a million marriage stories. I told him no 3 times before I finally caved, and that was 80 years ago. And she's saying no should be enough, or it's sexual harassment. And what they're doing there is, see, this is being paired with, his brother, who like 50 people are like, yeah, he raped me. So he
right.
rapes a bunch of people versus he asked me out again after saying no are being treated
right.
the same way.
Yes.
He's on the same list as his brother.
Yeah, that's
and
interesting.
These are being treated. So when this becomes a societal problem, instead of a problem where people can be punished, then, punishment's the same. They both go to therapy or whatever. And what this also does is, this is the First Amendment problem right here. This is, you don't even know. It's not, like you said a second ago, it's not going to be an objective standard. The standard of proof is going to be how you subjectively make someone feel. And if you make someone feel like they've been harassed, if they subjectively determine that, then they can accuse you of that, and you can be branded a sexual harasser. Perhaps they're even trying to change policy to fit that, which I believe they are. Potentially even jail time in the future based on the subjective feeling of one individual. And the reason they can do that, the reason they want to do that, is because if they had some sort of objective standard that was like the letter of the law, then men could make the same claims against, gay guys. Gay guys are gay guys are dudes, right? And so they're going to be just as aggressive towards the people that they're going after. So if it becomes this standard and a guy wanted to make that claim, since it's going to be a subjective thing, they're going to say, no, you didn't get sexually harassed. So they're going to base it on how people were made to feel.
And it could go even deeper than that, in that then they're saying you can't say certain things. And right, I can see with my kids, like my son got in trouble at school because he said, just jokingly, slave. He said somebody was like being a slowpoke, and he was like, hurry up, slave. And the teacher lost his mind, just really. And my son was like, "What? We ended slavery. We fought a war against slavery. I'm against slavery. I was just kidding," And the guy was like, "There's mass genocide all over the world." And he was just like, "But I wasn't talking about mass genocide," So then that's when the kid said, he got in trouble for a few things like that at his new school. And that's when he said, "I won't have any opinions anymore." And so if you're not allowed to say things, you're not allowed to think them, and if you can't think them, you can't think, then, it could be as easy as to say they want you to stop thinking of sex when you see women. Maybe they're okay with the male sexual. You probably won't hear as much about the gay sexual harassment, and it may be even more prevalent. I was sexually harassed by a woman. And she was extremely aggressive. But I read a great a quote in this book, The Dead, by Hank Harrison, about the Grateful Dead. Hank Harrison was Courtney Love's father, and some people think he was Jerry Garcia's CIA handler. I don't know. But there's a quote in the book that it was during the original Women's Lib this was about. And he said, I try to tell these chicks that censorship is worse than chauvinism. And the guy, he's not a very sympathetic person, this author. I don't like him. I like the book, but I don't like him. And but he's right I think he's right about that. So on Fox News, when they say bigotry is the worst crime a person could commit, it's like, no, raping a child, torture and murder, that kind of stuff is worse. But what I object to when they say it, put it in those terms, those super, super scary, reprehensible terms, is that that you learn to not think, not allow yourself to think at all. And if you can't think, even, if you can't allow yourself to think something that is not okay to think, then you simply can't think anything that you haven't been told is okay to think. And then you have no creativity.
And they're teaching kids, or they're teaching male children to feel like they're sexual predators, and that's something they have to learn to overcome.
And this is all part of the emasculation of men and the kind of masculinization, I guess, of women. I was a very productive investment banker with I'm great at numbers. I was also good at law. I'm not saying I'm not a productive person. I'm just saying, and thank God, because after how I grew up and my mother's a prisoner in my house, basically, it's good that we have economic options. I appreciate that. But there is something valid about the role men play, about the role women play in a family, in a community. It happens to stem from their natural abilities. Women have children and have them nurse, they have them with them. There's that nurturing thing. Men don't have that, and they have more strength, so they can, drag home the carcass or whatever. But if you take away these roles, if you mess it up like that, I really feel like it all comes down to being able to control society, even to the point of the civil unrest thing. If you have men who are not allowed to feel like men, are not allowed to own guns or speak freely, if you really make them that timid, I'm not saying I want aggressive men. Aggressive men scare me. I was sexually harassed, even sexually abused in my life many times, and it's scarring. But at the same time, if you take away all masculinity, all roles, you do make the population more vulnerable. People won't stand up for themselves, and
there's no threat to the status quo.
Yes, and they can't question the assumptions they're being taught because they're no longer capable of thinking. There's no strength, there's no courage. I'm not, and women too. Don't let them tell you, you have to go be a tax slave. You don't have to be a tax slave. They keep raising the taxes because we go out and work, and keep working. That's great. I love it. I do it. I'm just saying, you can think for yourself. They tell you to think for yourself by going and being a lawyer. It's no, think for yourself by deciding what you want to do. And if you want to have what your economic role, what your domestic role should be, but think for yourself and have the courage to stand up for it. I feel like this is part of that fundamental change they're going for in society. To make
absolutely. This is this rings very true of the communist push back in the the early 30s or whatever. And, actually I was thinking about this in relation to McCarthyism, in my opinion, because here's what the communists did. They decided back in the 30s at the International Communist Conference or Communist Congress, the seventh Communist Congress, that they were going to basically go underground and shed their communist colors and co-opt organizations, the United Front. So they were going to infiltrate all these organizations, and they were going to take on the language and the image of these other organizations. It's going to take over the course of decades so that they could gain political power behind a cloak of somebody else's name and face, because the open communist appeals at that point in time did not have legitimacy. And they were very clear about their willingness to do this. They would do it constitutionally or legally when they had avenues to do it. But when they didn't, they would always subvert. That was always their go-to, deception and subversion. And like you were talking about a second ago, you're basically talking about subversion, subverting the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and everything. Do it by making circumstances where people can't talk or say what's on their mind,
and guilty until proven innocent. It's all over the summary executions in these crime scenes. Now it's taken on this in the political realm with these sexual harassment accusations.
Absolutely,
it's everywhere.
Yeah, and
everywhere
when McCarthyism happened. When all these communists got outed, so to speak, it reached a point kind of like this is, to where it lost its meaning. Someone said you're a communist, and it's like you're calling everybody a communist. If everybody's guilty, nobody's guilty. So what that does is when it loses its meaning, it gives those people who actually were carrying on subversive activities. Gives them cover. They can go back underground. And I believe that they did that on purpose. I believe that was intentional to complete the shedding of their colors, so that they made people believe that communism was dead, communism is
or that it was harmless, because if it's everywhere and there's no damage. That's the funny thing about McCarthy, is that my mother loved Joe McCarthy. Can you believe it? My mother loved Joe McCarthy, and she thought that he was truly wronged. And I think maybe he was a good guy, and he was so right about the communists. The Venona papers came out after the USSR fell, and the people he accused were actual spies. The cleaning lady, they were spies. He was right. He didn't follow. I think he did. He wasn't scrupulous. I believe it's possible. I don't know. I didn't really make a study of it, that he wasn't scrupulous about the law in that way. But the outcome was so the opposite. It backfired so severely that you have to start to wonder if he was. I doubt he was in on it. I mean, I think he died of alcoholism and was really dejected. But if he was what I've been accused of as being a useful idiot, just like being I was accused of being a useful idiot because someone said I allow people to vent, and because of that they won't take action. That they think I represent them, but I don't actually make an impact. But in his case, he made such an impact that it took out any potential to really excise the problem.
Yeah, and that's what happens anytime any group is getting outed, or any person is about to get outed. I mean, this is written about in Harold Laswell's Propaganda During World War, that if you're getting outed, if it's inevitable that damning information is going to come out, you go on the attack, and you overwhelm the public with information. So in the case of McCarthyism, you just start accusing everybody. If you're about to come out, because if you're not in isolation, it's the same thing that's going on right here. If a couple people are going to be guilty, you got to start accusing everybody, so it gets flooded out, and you can't prosecute everybody. You can't, if everybody
That's
did
very,
it.
very interesting. Now I get what you're saying, really. Like in this case, who is it all to protect? Harvey Weinstein, if anybody's going to get it, it's him.
I'll tell you what they're not talking about is they're not talking about pedophilia, really. Like that thing with Kevin Spacey's, the kid looked young. Had he hit puberty? I don't know. He was 14 at the time. He looked like a really young kid. He talked about himself. But when you hear the stories of other people coming out, and there seems to be credible evidence to it, and of course he would get his case also, although there's not going to be.
Roy Moore. Roy Moore is the one where they're saying he liked it.
Exactly. They're saying the pedophile stuff, and I said all along when the Weinstein thing first happened that I think this is a plan. They did it on purpose. I think he was part of it. I think a lot of these. I think Kevin
I
Spacey
like
was part of
women with fully formed boobs. Like,
right.
I'm one of the good guys.
Well, I think that he's probably, if he's involved in some of the other stuff, he's saying you can throw me under the bus here, and that's going to by doing that, that's going to sweep away all the other stuff. Nobody's ever going
to. I think it's to sell his bankrupt company without making it look like he's selling it because it's bankrupt. But.
Right. He could also, it could be a little bit of both, though, because if you're talking about
everything, I agree.
All of this, then because nobody's talking. See, people are talking about Bill Clinton right now. There are people on the left who are pretending they're retroactively saying Bill Clinton should have stepped down with the Monica Lewinsky thing. They're only saying that because they're going to be directing allegations towards Trump here.
At the time, they were saying you guys are such squares when it comes to sex.
Yeah.
But that whole thing was a diversion from Whitewater and Mina and stuff. Ken Starr was engaged to do a criminal investigation, and he turned it into a soap opera with sex. He was not engaged to investigate Monica Lewinsky. That was a diversion.
Right.
I want to say something about McCarthy.
Let me finish my thought on that.
Yeah.
They're saying now, they're writing articles how he should have stepped down. They're saying this so that they can justify what they say about Trump, saying he needs to step down. But what they're not talking about, like, this is how you know that they're full of it, is they're not talking about the fact that Kevin Spacey was on the Lolita Express with Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein. And Maxwell Jesanine, or whatever her name is. They're not talking about the connections. They're not talking about the court documented connections, which we did a long show on. That it's undeniable that there are some very like Trump had some connections with Epstein too, but his you can actually Trump, he comes out looking all right in that situation when you really investigate it, when you talk to him.
I think even the whistleblower said that Trump just sit in the kitchen with him.
Exactly. Yeah. And
I never thought of Trump. I mean, I think Trump is an actor extraordinaire, but I never.
That's what they're not talking about. They're
he had an MO in New York where he would pick chicks out of the crowd, which is what Clinton used to do. And like the allegation that he raped a 13-year-old, I just cannot. He just doesn't seem.
I looked at that. I mean, I investigated that allegation. The ones that have come forward against Trump, and I'm not saying that he might not have done something. I don't know. I'm just saying that the ones they've presented, like the porn star, who came forward, and every 2 seconds she mentioned her website. She mentioned her new business. And I typed in her name. What comes up first? Her website. This was a public relations stunt. Nobody filed any actions. You look at the background of the interaction, at least this porn star and a few of the other ones. And the porn star was at an event where she was paid to go to the event for her company to solicit money from billionaires. And her story is Trump hugged me too tight and walked me around the golf course and invited me to his room, and I brought 2 girls with me. So you're telling me a porn star who's paid to go flirt with billionaires to try and get investments for their film production company brings 2 girls to Trump's room? He's thinking jackpot, and you're saying it's sexual harassment? I found a picture of this girl at a booth, which she describes as being a booth. I can't remember the girl's name. Wicked Pictures Productions was the production company, but showing what she does. Showing what she does at these booths when she goes to these events. And she's standing with her legs locked, facing the booth, with her ass in the air, wearing a thong, while all of the men who she's trying to sell products and get investments from are around her ass, Googling her ass, and she's shaking it in front of them. This is what she was doing at this event that she claims Trump harassed her at. And nobody
let's clarify what we're talking about here. I try to tell my daughter, as my husband says, just because you can wear a meat suit to the zoo doesn't mean it's a good idea. So, like, I'll say to my daughter, don't wear, and I'm actually kind of, my standards for modesty are probably higher than your average mom, just because I don't think it's nice. I don't like it to be able to see somebody's underwear hanging out from the bottom of their shorts. Like, I just don't even think it's like nice looking. So I try to teach my daughter to have like a little class in that regard. And I'm like, plus it's gross. Like, people are going to have weird thoughts about you, kind of young. And she'll say, nobody has any right to touch me. I can dress however. I can walk around naked. No one has anyone's right to touch me. Like, that's 100% true. No one has any right to touch you. That is absolutely true. And you could do whatever you want, and no one has the right to touch you. However, you shouldn't walk around with your junk hanging out and thinking that people aren't going to think weird stuff. People are gross. Lead us not into temptation. Like, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do it. And in the workplace, it's very distracting. It's inappropriate. What you want to do at a workplace is keep that stuff contained. Like, what you want to do, that's why chicks wear suits that are, not, or I used to intentionally wear clothes that were not sexy because I needed to have conversations with people. I wanted them to look me in the eyes, and you just use your head. But as this chick, there's absolutely no, like, people are not allowed to drag her off into a room or whatever. If she was flirtatiously kissing a guy like Trump or whatever, and he puts his hand around her waist, I mean, that seems like a quid pro quo to me.
Right. That's my point.
You're not going to be too strict about, you know what I mean? Like, you can't draw a fine line if what you're doing is walking the line. I'm not saying it's her fault. I'm just saying you cannot judge that kind of a situation, that kind of a nuance from the outside. If he slipped her a roofie, then yes, you can judge that.
I should clarify. Her claim wasn't even a claim of assault. She said that Trump kissed her, and after describing the event and then after looking at her pictures at all other similar events where she's kissing random guys on the cheek, some on the mouth, putting her ass, her standard mode of behavior is to come on to wealthy people. Then
yeah, and if she initiated the touching, you know what I mean?
Yeah, she said he hugged her tight, he kissed her on the cheek, and he offered to pay her to have sex with him. Now, all of that might be true. None of it's sexual harassment.
Now, yeah, I mean, even if he asked her repeatedly, like the other chick was like, Bob Weinstein asked me out repeatedly. Asked her repeatedly for,
it was a 30-minute commercial for her new business, and I watched, they were all represented by Gloria Allure. None of them filed charges.
All red,
yeah. And all of them mentioned their business and their websites throughout the entire press conference. They all got 30-minute commercials for their entrepreneurial ventures.
Well, that's when you look at these people and say, well, 6 people accused Roy Moore, not 5. If it was 5, I wouldn't believe it, but it's 6. Right. It's like, okay, but what are they in on? Maybe every one of those people has some parking violations. So, you don't know why people are saying that stuff. When you're talking about political power or access to media or what people might have underneath it all, and there's also statute of limitations in this Roy Moore's case. I mean, it's like 30 or 40 years ago. Statute of limitations is there for a reason. It's because it's very hard to defend yourself or to prove allegations. It's really a bad defense. It's a protection for you because it's very hard to defend yourself after all that time has gone by. You don't remember, and you can't remember your alibis and all that kind of stuff. It's just not fair to bring all that old stuff up, and who knows why people lie or choose to say, if it's subjective, you can choose to say it was wrong. Yeah, that's why you have to stay away from those subjectivity things, because then.
But that's what they're going for, though.
What they're really doing here, like they're doing in so many other areas, is exactly what Michael Chertoff benignly stated, just casually, sweetly slipped in the most intellectual little thing. Oh, we just need to change the fundamental legal architecture. It's different now.
That's exactly what I have written in my notes.
You led me there.
Yeah, I knew that you that would come to your mind because
yes, it did.
Chertoff. There's articles where people are talking about how they're fundamentally transforming, the legal, that this is going to fundamentally, like the same language that Chertoff used. There's articles talking
really?
about how the policy we have now isn't working. This is a fundamental shift in our legal process. This is a tipping point.
You nailed it in saying that if everybody's guilty, nobody's guilty, that then it's systemic, it's policy, it's cultural. And here we've really taken to the extreme the idea that policy shapes culture. They want you to believe that culture shapes policy. But I think at this point, with their psychotronic weapons and their psychological studies, their understanding of crowds and power and media and all that stuff, which they do not share with us, and the MK Ultra experiments, which Joe Atwill talks about as being not by the podcast I like so much, that he does not, that the MK Ultra thing wasn't really about creating assassins, which the MK Ultra was mind control project of the CIA in the 60s or whatever, 70s maybe, that it wasn't about creating assassins like Sirhan, although it might have, or sex slaves like Marilyn Monroe, although it might have. It was really about understanding, controlling the masses, that it was actually a project that was meant to understand the psyche in order to control it en masse. And
they've been studying the unconscious mind, the psyche, for over 100 years. Like Bernays talks about that in his book.
Like
he talks
formally
about
at that level.
Yeah. I mean, investing millions of dollars, billions at this point, into studying and implementing and testing these things. Like, you tell people stuff about psychology or social sciences and they go, oh, I get it. I get propaganda. I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. These people have been investing billions of dollars for over 100 years, at least, testing and scientifically improving these methods. I don't think your high school psychology class got you up to their speed.
Yeah. How about creating psychological dysfunction? Think about the drug war. Think of so when we had our show last week on WSB about the Texas shooter, or the one before, the people were all calling like, this is mental illness. Like, maybe, but it's mental illness that's that is being intentionally cultivated by the people who bring you the drug war, by the people who bring you psychopharmacology, by the people who bring you government education. We're being, even if all these shootings happen to be surging massively because there's a fundamental shift in the psyche, that was not organic. That didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The government even funds the technologies from birth control to the internet that change our culture so fundamentally, so rapidly, and disconnect us from our parents, where we might have had some grounding, or our culture or community or church or anything. I mean, you have to look at it holistically. You have to look at it, the whole society, and how dramatically it's changed, and for the worse as far as mental health goes. And here you have these guys who are totally out of bounds, and we're saying, well, it's a social problem, whatever, let's make a law.
Right. The former president of Facebook, he came out on, it was some recording, or it was an interview or something, but he was talking about how Facebook was intentionally messing people up, how they're getting them addicted. They were making them depressed, anxious when they were away from Facebook, all that stuff you just talked about. He openly talked about how Facebook was doing that. This is like 2 weeks ago. He's no longer the president there. He's the former president, but he openly admitted that they do. I mean, and that if you read the studies about it, and really if you just know that it's, people get antsy, it's a drug. I mean, they talked about how the screen time has a similar effect on children's mind that heroin addiction has on people.
Oh my gosh, I have to tell you this. So wait, first let me say, so the internet, this adds a new wrinkle to the internet is a limited hangout thing. It gives them the ability to surveil us night and day, if that's a word. Yeah. It gives them the ability, now they're going to flip it so it's purely censored. So they're going to control the information we get, but it's also a psychotronic weapon.
Yeah.
In that way. So my son has Down syndrome, and I find the insights he brings that I get from him because of the way he just absorbs stimuli raw and brings them home. When he says stuff about slavery that he's learning in school, Donald Trump's bringing back slavery, he'll point to people and say, oh, Mom, he's African. I'm like, he's American. What are you talking about? Look at him. He's getting that at school, and they want to act like they're against racism and stuff. I don't teach my kids to look at people that way. He gets that at school. And I know it because unlike the other kids who absorb it, he doesn't. It just, it just ricochets around in his brain and shoots back out his mouth. But the electronics are also a way to just see the raw way it affects him. So he was so addicted to YouTube, and all he wanted to watch was horror, that I had to take his little crappy little laptop away. He had a Chromebook. I took it away, and I just let him use my phone once. I started letting him use it like every morning. He just watches YouTube while I get the other kids off to school. And he started being like saying bad words and bad things. And so we took it away from him. Yesterday, I've gone through this ritual with him a few times, but I was sitting yesterday and I took the YouTube away from him. So he was going through withdrawals. And I've seen heroin addicts. I've lost family members to heroin. I've gotten them back when they've kicked the habit. But I have seen drug addicts on drugs, off drugs, withdrawing from drugs, lying about the drugs they're using, stealing from you for their drugs. This guy with the YouTube, he was so angry, vicious, irrational. I mean, this is the sweetest guy under normal circumstances. He was what we term hulking out. I mean, he was just, I remained calm, but I could have been nervous because he's getting bigger. And I said to my other son, who was like definitely a little nervous, I said, man, this is addiction. What you are witnessing is addiction, and you have it too. You don't exhibit it this obviously, but you have it, and it's from the screens. I mean, it does something inside your brain as if you doused a physical chemical on it. Sorry for the rants, but I'm just telling you, I never saw anything like it before. My husband's reading a book called Glow Kids about that in the hopes of finding a little more insight. I mean, I don't want to take it away from them completely. I can't live. Here's a question. Here's a little, I was going to say, put me on the couch. Would that be sexual harassment, Binkley?
Well, I guess it depends on the context.
I guess it depends on if you like me or not, right?
Yeah,
Didn't you say that it's sexual harassment if
you don't like somebody?
So on the psychiatrist's couch, I would like to ask. So I see my kids like this. I see my from the screens to the immodesty to whatever. I really do not have the time or energy to create a home, and my husband doesn't buy into it as much as I do anyway, but to create a home life that's completely outside the culture that we live in. So I can't take away all of the screens. I can't have my daughter dress like I dress. I can't, I don't know if it makes even sense to fight the fight in that way, because I was raised rather in a sheltered way. And as I said, we've already buried two of my siblings to drug use. I mean, I don't know how to live in the world of screens, knowing what an impact it all has from the actual addiction part of it to the content. It's full, it's multifaceted. What's your answer?
A friend of mine's kids, I started telling her a lot of this similar stuff. I was like, that stuff's like heroin to them, right? Because they were doing the same thing that you're describing here. They were freaking out when they had to put their tablets. I mean, losing it.
I've seen little babies. I saw it at that party I was in. Maybe I told you about in Mexico. Some people had their little babies, like babes in arms. Like, it wasn't for children, it was for little babies. They had them in their high chair with their iPad in a little like Teletubby thing. Oh my gosh, Teletubbies was predictive programming.
Yeah.
Wow, I just realized that. So the kids have their high chairs, and the moms, they're trying to introduce their baby to these people at the party, and the baby's like, ah! Like really screaming. Like, you take the thing away,
right?
Freak out, babies.
And the kid's probably watching a YouTube channel where it's puppets jerking off and cussing every 2 seconds.
Well, that's the problem with my son who has Down syndrome. He's 15. And he's got his tastes are kind of weird, and I don't know where it's going to end up. I mean, even the horror stuff, even guys playing video games, sometimes he watches, they're using strange language.
Oh,
they're
absolutely.
Talking viciously about killing.
That's their favorite channels. Like, the ones that are vulgar and crazy are the most popular ones. What she did, I told her about some of the studies they've done and the effect that it has on them. And I sent her the links. She just sat down with her kids and she was like, I know you're mad at me, but here, well, we're going to read through these things together. And she had them read through those articles, and that helped them. It's not easy for them, but that helped them understand
why. What do they do instead? Because there aren't kids in my neighborhood out there playing stickball. They're not playing stickball. When I let my kids out, they go into other people's houses and then just go do it there. Then all of a sudden they want to go over their friends' houses because their friends have no controls like that.
Right.
And then how much are they going to read? And then do I have to entertain them? You know what I mean? They're getting older. Do I have to babysit them now? I moved to a non-neighborhood on purpose. I moved from my nice, beautiful neighborhood to a not neighborhood so that I could control where my kids went.
Right.
Because they were disappearing into houses, and there was a little bit of a scandal where all the 8-year-olds were watching, SEX on YouTube. Now my kid escaped that, but I was like, I can't have them free range kids because they free range right into somebody's, lair.
Get a cabin in the woods, maybe.
Actually, I've always wanted to get off the grid. I've said that since I went out with a billionaire once who I just talked to the other day on the phone. He hit some rough times. And I said, I told you we should have moved to Wisconsin. Take $100 million off the top. He was like, what would be the point? I was like, just kidding. I wanted to just get off the grid. Forget it. Just go. I tell my husband, but every time he gets a raise, the tax rate goes up and his tax bracket goes up. And I realized like 15 years ago, it's like, oh my gosh, we're on a treadmill. This is never going to end. Let's just go. Let's just quit. They win. I want to be a waitress again. Forget it. And he's like, no, we'll get there. I'm like, yeah. We're not getting there. We're just not going to get there.
Okay. I want to read some of the solutions that have been offered up for the sexual assault harassment epidemic, this avalanche of sexual assault that's going on. It's no telling who's going to be accused next. Everybody.
But it's been going on for so long. It's probably less than it used to be.
Honestly, not everybody's getting in trouble. Yeah, it's been going on for a long time, but now, it's only being exposed because there's an agenda there. The people, they aren't going to get in trouble. In fact, I'll make a prediction right now that because Bryan Cranston, you know who that is?
Yeah. He's the guy from Breaking Bad and Malcolm in the Middle.
Might very well be one of the next accused. I know he's the last person people think, but after watching this interview, it wouldn't surprise me if he is. Because he was talking about how there can be redemption for Weinstein and for Kevin Spacey. And I said this as soon as this happened, that I think that these two are going to come back a lot like Polanski, and they're going to be treated as heroes. They recovered.
Well, can I read you this quote real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jerry Studs, the Congressional Page scandal was from the 80s where these guys had these teenage pages in Congress and they were having sex with them, and they actually ended the page program. But here was one of the examples was this guy, Jerry Studs. It said, like Dan Crane, who I think was with a chick, female teen. Democrat Jerry Studs was also censured by the House in 1983 for having sex with a teenage congressional page. But in an unexpected twist, the unmarried Studs turned the moment to his advantage and continued to be reelected until his retirement in 1997. When Studs was censured before the House, he made the most of the moment by unapologetically coming out, making him the first openly gay member of Congress.
Sounds a lot like Kevin Spacey.
Yep, and he kept his seat until he retired.
Maybe Spacey was one of those kids.
Maybe. And maybe he made lemonade.
I'm betting right now that those two come back and they're treated as heroes.
Yeah, I thought so with Kevin Spacey too. I was like, I'm not buying. Bill Cosby's not coming back as a hero, though.
Let me go into some of these solutions because these are very telling in where they're going to go with it. One of the things they're trying to do is they're trying to pass something in the Supreme Court where they can file a class action lawsuit. So everybody who claims they were sexual, because there's like some people who it's like 300 people accused.
That's ridiculous. These are individual actions that need to be proven individually. A class action is when you make something and everybody gets a problem from your single action.
Right. This is the transformation that I'm talking about with like Chertoff, the fundamental transformation of the legal system. I got included in a class action lawsuit recently because of a robocall I got like years ago. Didn't even know I was a victim, but now I'm included. So that's
I got to check for something like that. Yeah.
Right. So for all I know, I could get included. Well, not me, but a woman could get included in this sexual assault thing, and she might not even realize she was assaulted.
Wow. What is the definition of sexual assault? Like, is it possible to be sexually assaulted without knowing?
Well, they're trying to do what you said, where they have an idea that they want to shift the policy somehow. Like I was talking about earlier, they want it to be more subjective because we're going to have virtual reality world included in this, and people are going to be saying they were virtual.
Oh yeah.
So it's going to be totally subjective. And they got to create enough outrage, so they have to keep it broad enough. They cannot define it concretely. They can't bring the letter of the law in. If they bring the letter of the law in, then it excludes people. They want to keep their victim base wide open and draw more people in, create outrage, and that outrage in turn demands that the law gets changed, which is what they're talking about right now, changing the law because of all these victims. Which not to say that there aren't real victims. There are real victims, but these real victims – it's a lot harder for them to get actual justice because they're bringing everybody in.
Because there is a way to get actual justice. You have to bring a tort. Like Bill O'Reilly's victims, they get paid off because they have evidence. It's so easy to get evidence nowadays too, because they leave messages on your voicemail, they text you, you have your phone, you could just turn it on. It's so easy to get that kind of evidence. Now, I was actually taught in business school in a class called organizational behavior that if you're going to sue your company, you better be sure for anything. You better be sure you're going to make enough money to never work again for the rest of your life because no one is going to
hire you. Yeah.
Hire a suer. Now, that is a deterrent, but that's why some people are surprised to hear that I actually am in favor of like huge settlements, huge trial awards and stuff, is that I have been involved in just trying to get the money that I was owed from my company on a contract that I had. I wasn't looking for extra punitive or anything. It's so painful to go through that process. Really, I wouldn't do it. I don't think I'd do it I'd have to be sure I was making a lot of money to go through it, and you need to be encouraged to do it by having the potential for a big payday. So if 1 in 100 people gets $100 million, it gets 100 people to sue for that, or 1 million, it's right. Like the lottery. So I'm just saying that you need to, there is recourse. The law is there. And why isn't it working? I don't know, but what you don't need is to change the fundamental laws yet. And the only reason the media is addressing this is that, as you said earlier, there is an agenda, and it's not to get justice for these people, or they would never have spiked all the Weinstein stories in the first place. Yeah,
or they'd pay attention to people like R. Kelly.
Who says gross things, right?
No, who has sex slaves, who's been there's a whole bunch of people
that aren't pee on somebody.
Yes, there's a bunch of people that don't fit the profile that aren't included in these, that aren't getting talked about at all.
Didn't Larry David said it's only the Jewish guys who are getting targeted?
It is a lot of Jewish guys, but it's a lot of rich white dudes, and there's a lot of powerful elites in every industry, and they're scaling it down to tell women, which I'm going to tell you. Let me go through this list. This list will shed light on some of it. One of the first things that I saw that they want people to do, the actions that they're encouraging people to take. This is an indivisible thing, by the way. This is very indivisible. That Bolshevik group, which Obama helps fund, is the group that is largely behind a lot of this. See something, do something is what I call this one. An actionable step is people need to be held accountable, but not just the perpetrator, the bystander. Men specifically is what they talk about.
What?
All men need to be held accountable.
That is fundamentally, is against the fundamental law. Is you don't have to be a good Samaritan unless you stand in the way. So if you're sitting with somebody who's choking and the guy next to you wants to save the choking victim and you say, I got it, and then you're responsible. Or if it's clear that if you act like you have it under control so other people do not act, that's it. There's no other, you're not obliged to act. That is so
Yeah, so you're guilty
up.
if your friend does it and or if somebody you see does it. But here's the thing. Here's what this also causes. Remember we talked about the subjective standard. Since nobody has a clear, concrete definition of what it is, and since people are allowed to say that someone asked me out and I said no, so that's sexual harassment because he asked me out again, people are allowed to form their own determination of what sexual assault or sexual harassment is. So they're going to see two people walking down the street who got their arms around each other. And from their subjective point of view, that's going to be sexual assault. They might go take action and do something.
Honestly, I saw a teenage couple walking out of my son's school, and the boy, just had his hand. It was I really wanted to call her parents anyway. But I mind my own business because it was clearly consensual. Right. However, if I were to fear legal repercussions, some people might change that. So,
absolutely. And so that's what they're trying to get people to see something, do something based on their own subjective belief, feeling of what is or is not sexual harassment or assault.
You're making my blood run cold.
There's like 5 of these that'll probably do that.
Right. I'll stop interrupting you. Go.
This next one is to hold the Harvey Weinstein of every industry accountable. And after I saw that, I started looking up some of the other industries and other industries that have been included, that people of late, since the Harvey Weinstein effect kicked in, have been people been accused, has been Uber drivers, Jameis Winston, the football player, the wealthy football player, and also a bunch of other rich people have been accused of sexually harassing Uber drivers. That plays into the driverless car thing, because if you can't...
Totally. And it's bull. Because Uber is the perfect monitoring device. You have to give your license. You have to give your credit card on the one hand and your license on the other. You have no loyalty to each other. So you're not going to be like, I'm going to lose my job. You would rat on each other in a second. I ratted on some guy for hanging up on me, like for canceling the trip against the rules. And I never ratted in my life. I felt bad, but he was going to ruin Uber. Like right. You can't have people not showing up.
Right. Yeah.
And the sexuals that would ruin Uber. You have to get rid of those people, because Uber, I love Uber, but I know that it's a stepping stone to
it's done. Yeah.
World government. Sorry, is that bad? I hate to tell people.
You don't want people knowing you ratted on somebody,
Dude, as a Brooklynite, you could get killed for something
That's
like
bad.
that.
Yeah. You don't want that to get back to
I'm
people.
I'm telling you, in my entire life, I can't count on the fingers of one finger how many times I've ratted. That was it.
They've targeted the service industry because people need tips. Waitresses need tips, so they have to subject themselves to this horrible... I'm sitting here... What's a strip club going to be like if everything is going to be sexual harassment in the service industry?
No, you're making me sick. I have written more than one article on how they're trying to get rid of tipping. And one guy, it's such a scam. There's actually a lawsuit going on to sue these scamming, lying, big restaurant owners, because taking the tips away, they raise the price on the menus 15% or 20%. They keep the money and they give the waitresses $15, but the waitresses were making $45 an hour when they were getting the tips. Like it's a complete scam.
Exactly.
And one guy, Tom Carluccio, or whatever his name is, of Kraft, who I used to like, he said, actually tipping is racist, because I guess I don't know, white servers make more than black servers. I find that very hard to believe, because you just look at the number and you add 20%. But he was saying something like that, and or sexist, like at the fancier restaurants, it's all men, which is true. That's annoying, but that's changing. That actually is changing. And there was definitely racism in the waitressing and sexism. Like some places hired only white chicks and some places hired only males. I know that. I remember that from when I was young, and it's not cool. However, that's just an excuse they're using to get rid of the tips, because then it's just bringing everybody down to where nobody's making anything instead of redeeming the problem, which I would say I have not noticed those trends in years anyway. So I feel like we were on the mend, and now they're just hurting the economic lower and middle classes, which is often is subtle like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Go.
All right, I'm going to list off these quick.
Yeah, keep going.
We got a bunch of them to go through. Domestic workers, union leaders, farm workers, editors, producers, comedians, agents, actors, congressmen and women who they've apparently paid like $18 million out in settlements over the past couple of decades.
And it's secret because
Right.
even though those guys work for us, and I believe it's taxpayer money.
Political pundits, Silicon Valley, and along with the Silicon Valley, I found a headline that said how Reddit is turning young men into misogynists or whatever the term is.
Misogynists.
Misogynist. Yeah. So social media, it's going to be social media regulation there because social media is turning certain people into misogynists. So
I noticed that weird manosphere trend. It looked so artificial a couple of years ago. I was like, well, this is such nonsense. You know what I mean? It's like the answer to being emasculated is not turning into an asshole. It's just
right.
So
yeah.
Just assert yourself. Have some courage. Don't whine on social media. Get a job, make a living, get a wife who loves you. I mean, it's just I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. It's so paradoxical that these guys are just, the stereotypical in your mom's basement whining in the manosphere. It's like the manosphere is a real place. It's not, that's what would define it. I love men. I do. So I just, to think of that of a men being transmogrified into something else is a poverty. That is why I went into investment banking, because I loved men. I was like, wow, that's a very male-oriented.
Investment banking?
Yeah. It's just, I literally, in my class, there were 40 people hired. Only 2 of us were women. And I was like, people were like, you don't want to work there. It's like, gosh, did you hear that? Well, think of the ratio. And they're like, think of the ratio. I'm like, no, think of the ratio.
Could have been a sports announcer.
Oh, no, I hate that. That I don't like. All right, what else? Keep going.
You're going to be really pissed about this one.
Oh, really? I've been really pissed about like 3 of them already. Really pissed. Like it really.
This is the one right here that just.
I like men. I like tipping.
And you like the right to face your accuser too, don't you?
I do like the right to face my accuser.
I call this one the Independent Sexual Assault Task Force, where they're trying to create policy. This is how they think they can fix it, where the accuser can anonymously go to an independent third party and make the accusation and remain anonymous.
No. That's fundamental that's legal architecture. My father taught me from when as early as I can remember, you have the right to face your accuser. And I'm telling you, I got out of being expelled, even though I was guilty in high school. I went to the principal and he said, Dean said you were at his party. And I said, I wasn't, and I have a right to face my accuser. And if you bring me, or he said, somebody said you were at Dean's party, and I knew it was Dean, but he didn't tell me who. And I said, bring that guy in here, whoever it is, I have a right to face my accuser. And I was the only one who didn't get expelled. And the principal knew. He was just like, really? I was like, yeah. And it works because you have that right.
I had documents from the Georgia Secretary of State page flagged and removed from Facebook by anonymous users who were supporting the John Ossoff campaign and simply were trolls who didn't like the fact that I put facts on there about him.
Yeah.
And it got removed as fake news because a bunch of people who I could not face. This is what this is right here. It's the same thing as flagging someone online.
And if Facebook had been a truly organic business that rose up out of a startup and faced competition like everybody else, and then would be in a realm where there are 100 competitors, but instead it was fostered by the government, incubated. It was nurtured along. It's been cooperating with the government. It gets this position of privilege and virtual monopoly because of its place as the arbiter of these things, because of its willingness to be a proxy for a government that takes your rights away. See what I mean? Like, as a libertarian, if it was a completely free market in tech, I wouldn't care if they treated you like that. It wouldn't matter if they had stupid laws because you would just go someplace else. But you can't go someplace else because they had this insurmountable advantage in getting plugged into the government incubator stuff. you know what I'm trying to say. So that you have to, I feel a little bad that I actually am using the right to face your accuser to defend myself for getting out of something that I was actually guilty of.
Yeah, you're kind of justifying their argument right now.
I know, but that's the reality. You let 10 innocent people go before you put, you let 10 guilty people go before you put an innocent person in jail. That's what we accept that. That's why we accept these legal principles. And because they've been proven out over the millennia. Because human nature has not actually changed as much as they want to tell us that having, screens that can sense heat has changed human nature. Technology has led to terrorism. No, we've always had terrorism.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's just, they want people to believe. They have to use that fear to justify whatever it is they're doing. Another one is obviously the education system. The colleges get the kids when they're young, teach the males that they are fundamentally to their core sexual abusers, and that they have to spend their life overcoming that. We've talked a little bit about this. I found a quote where they were talking about what they teach children. I mean, they're already doing workshops for this right now with children.
Oh, no.
And they're saying, here it is. Oh, yeah, the kid raised his hand in one of the workshops and said, well, what do you do if you want to ask someone out? And the girl teaching the class said, well, you need to read her body language.
But I'm not allowed to look at her body.
And on that point right there, I found an article because I was looking up what some of the laws were in other countries, in Europe especially. This is a headline. I found a number of interesting headlines. Here's the headline. Men don't think looking at women's breasts is sexual harassment, poll finds. That's the headline. And here's what it says in the article. A shockingly high number of Europeans don't think staring at a woman's breast constitutes sexual harassment. And then it goes on to talk about how looking at a woman's breast is sexual harassment.
I told you how I handled that, right, when I wasn't working?
Yeah, you did. It's an interesting approach.
I said, I'll give you 1 minute. Look as much as you want and hold that image in your mind forever. And then in the future, when we're talking, I want you to look in my eyes. You can think about the image in your mind, but you need to look at my, but this was somebody who worked for me. So it's easy to be definitive like that when they work for you. But I mean, if I had said it to someone I worked for, I really feel like he would have locked the door and rape me right then and there.
Right,
you can't really look at my breast for a minute.
Right.
But yes, it's annoying when they can't. It's rare though. Most guys, I know, maybe it's
most guys have learned since they were a kid to not get caught doing it. Is what it's by a lot. It's not like, I get if you're hanging your head down in a certain way and you're just putting it right there and staring and they're saying stop looking and you continue to do it. Yeah, that might reach a level of stalking and harassment, but guys can't help looking at girls can't help looking at guys.
Even if I would deliberately wear business suits with high necks, I would never flaunt it, but you couldn't help but notice, but I mean, does that help?
No.
Okay.
Guys who just learn to not get caught doing it. They're saying that just biologically reacting in a way is sexual assault. And then they also went on to say, and they're not talking about the type of joke that Al Franken does where he finds a girl who's passed out and grabs her breast. They're saying that just telling a sexual joke is sexual harassment.
See, but you can't do that. You know what that does when you do that? People have to use their good sense, their judgment. You can't do that because what that does is it really, truly excludes women from any kind of camaraderie. I actually went to strip clubs a couple of times with the guys I worked with because that's where they were going.
Yeah.
It was and they were fine with it. I was not, though. I will never do that again. But it was way uncomfortable. But then they were fine with it. They probably loved it, actually, now that I think about it. I have to say one quick thing about my daughter's school. She goes to this super old-fashioned school. They have a dance. And at the dance, the boys they get stars or coupons for the prize box every time they dance with a girl. And the boys only the boys can ask the girls. Girls cannot ask the boys. And the girls have to say yes if asked.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, I mean, talk about I mean, just if anybody knew what school she went to, they'd probably see something, do something. Oh my gosh,
Right.
like girls and boys dancing together. This must be stopped, But the gender roles are shocking. I love it. I think it's cute, and the kids don't notice it as being weird or anything.
Well, not yet.
My son gets super nervous, like when he was just like, oh, I really want, whatever the silly putty, but I'm totally nervous about asking a girl. Anyway,
but they have to say yes, though.
They have to say yes so that they don't feel nervous. And it teaches them how to, because it's culture. It
sucks for the girls.
No, the girls are fine with it because they get stars too.
But what if the boy they don't like doesn't ask them?
Every boy, at the end of it, like every boy asked every girl. Like they all dance with each other.
I see. That makes
By
sense.
the end of it, it works. But I'm just saying, like, they were culturally trying to train these kids on what courtship ritual. But when you start destroying culture, and when you mix culture either from other cultures, other religions, I think religion and culture, cult is the same thing, is like where the real origin of culture. Or even just generationally, like really change, really, really drive. Like my father came home from World War II and married my mother, when she was a teenager because they wanted to get it on, and one didn't do that back then. But then in the 60s, 20 years later, I saw like a Pulitzer Prize winning photograph of like 14 naked people intertwined on the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm like, how in 20 years do you get from here to there? But just generationally, if you screw up the culture like that, you don't know how to teach your kids. And then you have kids teaching kids. You have kids trying to figure it out. And that's a terrible plan. Like it really makes things awkward and dysfunctional and impossible. And that's what you have. That's actually what you have now. That's why like porn is such a crazy problem. And marriage and everything is just plummeting. And you've got Tinder, which is weird. I think maybe it's not, but it looks weird to me. Anyway, I know you're short of time. I had to rant that a little bit.
It's all right. The last thing that I have is that in France, it either already is, I think it already is, or they've made it a law, it's passed, that it's a fine, it's a crime, and you get fined if you catcall a woman while you're walking down the street or she's walking down the street.
You get a fine or it's fine?
No, you get fined. It's a crime.
Right. Being catcalled, it's super annoying. I have to say, I got a lot more of that when I was young. The younger I was, the more I got it, which makes me think that it's cowardly. You know what I mean? Because I was more voluptuous, when I got older than when I was like a teenager. But I used to get catcalled all the time. And I feel like the older I got, the less people want to tangle with you. So it seems cowardly, in my opinion, to do it like that. I did not like getting the catcalls, but as long as they didn't actually run after you and make like weird slurping noises.
Well, the point is, though, it's saying, "Hey, baby," and getting fined. I mean, that's First Amendment.
Yes.
Like if we were to model ourselves after these other countries.
But if it makes you nervous, I mean, I have walked when I was real young. I walked from like my aunt's house to my grandma's house in Brooklyn, and I really didn't even know my way around. And I got nervous. Like there were people who were really like throwing stuff at me, and that does that. I mean, I'm not saying it was a crime, but boy, I was scared. It can really scare you in the wrong environment. But
I used to live on the edge of Boys Town in Chicago.
Really?
I've been catcalled and it scared me to death.
Are you serious?
Used to do a comedy show in Chicago, and the show that was on after us was called Naked Boys Dancing. And every single week, a bunch of dudes would try and get me to be in the show. Not going to be in that show ever.
I feel I'm in danger. You know what I mean? Like I'm physically vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
you're kind of skinny, but like I'm a chick. You know what I mean? As I taught my daughter, I was like, all women. She thinks she's a feminist, a pro-life feminist. I said, all women, especially feminists, should be advocates of universal gun ownership. Because it's the great equalizer. Every woman on earth has a gun. Rape is a thing of the past. And she's like, yeah, you're right. I'm like, yes.
Does she know that they didn't let the pro-life feminist walk in the Women's March? The feminist.
Oh, I remember that. I don't know if I told her that.
You should tell her that.
Oh, I should tell her that, because then she'll realize that they're full of it.
Yeah.
They don't respect her right to choose. Because
Exactly.
her thing, like my mom is a big pro-lifer, but her philosophy, my mother's philosophy, she just goes, stands across the street from whatever it is, the abortion place, and she says the rosary. They don't yell or anything like that. And then if they help people, they have resources. So the idea is to pray to end abortion. Like, it's not, I don't think, like, our family doesn't really like take a really strong political stance. So I can understand how the feminists don't want being told what to do, that's why they reject those people. However, I mean,
they don't think that's feminism.
Yeah, you have to. That's where that censorship is worse than chauvinism thing comes in. It's like, I have tolerance for everything as long as you agree with me 100%. You know what I mean? And it's also why you really have to have a problem with federal laws. Federalizing law like that means that we all have to agree on everything, or you're threatening violence. Like, you're threatening me with violence if I decide to have an abortion. But that's only true because you decided to make it a federal law. You know what I'm saying? A federal law just means I will use violence on you if you don't do what I say.
Yeah.
So then it becomes this federal issue where they're like, you can't march with us because you're threatening us violence. And you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying the reason that they think they're justified in not letting the pro-lifers on is because they have made it a legal matter at the highest level, an inescapable legal matter. You can no longer have political disagreement in neutral territory like federal property because they want everything to be a federal law. It used to be like you could have state laws. So Alabama's going to have no abortion, but California would always have abortion. You know what I mean? And then you could just meet. You wouldn't have to argue with each other that one was trying to encroach on the other's rights when there's always. That was the idea of federalism. And I had one comment I wanted to make after you're finished about something different.
I'll tell you this. We got to wrap it up after your comment.
Yep.
unwomen.org, United Nations. In focus, leave no one behind. End violence against women and girls. This UN program is associated with the hashtag #MeToo. It says, a global campaign spanning November 25th to December 10th is taking place this year against the backdrop of an unprecedented global outcry. There's been articles written in the past couple of days, this is me, saying that the Weinstein effect has gone global, and they start listing all these other countries that are joining in on it as well, the hashtag #MeToo thing. And here on the UN side, it says, millions have rallied behind the hashtag #MeToo and other campaigns exposing the sheer magnitude of sexual harassment and other forms of violence that women everywhere suffer. I didn't know harassment was a form of violence. Breaking the silence is the first step in transforming the culture of our gender-based violence. So this is very much a globalist New World Order thing.
Dean, our Twitter pal, sent me chapter 5, I think, of Agenda 2030. I think that's where it's found. And it talks about this being a goal, which they said a couple of years ago. So here it is. This is how they're implementing the goal. That's why you've been seeing this. We've been talking about this women thing being in the spotlight for a while now. That in that chapter, it said something to the effect of one of our goals is to eradicate gender-based roles.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know how, like, nursing children, can be eradicated. Why eradicate gender-based roles? Like, why is that a goal? Why is that objectively bad? Why is that just on its face bad?
Well, they're trying to turn men against women.
They're trying to turn men into women in many cases. Like, I was just hearing somebody said that they have a thing where they're going to be able to implant a uterus in males.
Oh, wow. Be like a Black Friday thing. People be waiting in line all night for one of those.
I know. Why are they doing? So can I just say one other thing?
Yeah.
I know this started when Eric Erickson started talking about Trump and Megyn Kelly and Trump saying she bled out of her, whatever. Which was, he said the exact same thing about Chris Wallace. I mean,
Maybe he had a uterus implanted.
Maybe. Could have been. So, but Erickson was actually spelling out, and our podcast, I doubt any children listen to this podcast. People are not playing it over the radio in their cars. So I can say it, but he was talking about, Erickson was like, he should not be speaking about women menstruating or whatever. It's just like, what? He didn't, we never talk like that. I mean, I had women calling my show being like, I was never so grossed out in all my life than when I turned on, the radio and I hear this driving my kids around. So I noticed that's when it started. And then also vulgarity. They slip in when you and I have flagged it, CNN not editing out shit, WSG, the Wall Street Journal doing it, all over the place. I've seen it just slipped in there. And it bothers me because I'm not prepared for it. I'm in the car with my kids. And today, thank goodness my kids weren't in the car. I was on BBC World, and this chick said, "Excuse me, forgive me for relating this story to you, but it's so awful. I have to tell it." And then it tells the story that I'm actually not going to repeat because it's too disgustingly gross. And she was saying this, it was in my car, about, I guess the original story of Harvey Weinstein was that he had some woman cornered in a kitchen. Are you familiar with the story? With the potted plant?
I have no idea.
Oh, you don't know? Oh, my tongue is curling up in my mouth because I want to puke thinking about this, which I'm not repeating. And she's telling the story with the gross words in it about what? I'm not telling.
The potted plant.
Whatever. Don't ask, all right? Just don't ask because I'm not telling you. Google it if you have to know about it. And that's what she should have said in my car, which is normally full of my kids, my son with Down syndrome, who'll then just be like, he will say to me, "Mom, the commercials you're listening to," which is what he calls the news. Thanks. I'm just listening to commercials like on a station that just forgot to play the music. "The commercials you're listening to are inappropriate." I'm like, I know, I hate these commercials. So I'm just saying they're bringing this to us, and I hate it.
So did he ask her to swallow it?
Ah! What?
I don't know.
Why would you do that? I just told you I don't want to get gross. You know what? I'm mad at you now.
I had to fill in the blanks somehow.
No, you didn't. I said 4 times. I'm not saying this. You can Google it if you want.
You sitting here telling me to look up porn. I figured I'd ask you before I did that.
I do tell my kids, like, don't Google that, you know. It's like, what does this mean? I'm not telling you, and don't Google it. I do not want that search on my computer. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you guys for listening. Visit us at propagandareportdaily.com. If you want to help out the show, you can donate at PayPal or become a patron. Subscribe. Click on the little Apple icon or on the Android, if you listen on Android, whatever. All the buttons are at propagandareportdaily.com. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.